start the lesson with a joke. So there was this man that was, he was a church-going man, but he had his desk job, and over the years, of course, he got obese. And he decided one day, well, I'm going to stop going by the pastry shop every morning and getting that pastry and do a little bit of exercise. So he started this routine, and in fact, he was so really to do that, he went a different route, so he wouldn't go by the bakery that he bought his pastry at. So he was getting better and better shape, and one day, though, he really had an urge to go by the bakery. So actually, he was asleep that morning. He was, kind of hard getting up, so he went by the bakery, not on purpose. But he said, God, I've been listening to your guidance. We've been doing real good. I'll tell you what, I really want a pastry this morning. I'm driving by the bakery, so if there's a parking space open right in front of the bakery, then that's going to be my sign that I can go in there and get a pastry this morning. And so sure enough, he went by the bakery, and voila, a parking space was open right in front of the bakery. So he parked, went in, and got his pastry, and he took him to work, and everybody got at work said, well, what's going on, man? You're on this diet, you're doing great. Why are you breaking it like this? And he said, well, I'm a religious man. I said my prayer, I looked for guidance, and I got this parking space right in front of the bakery. And then after the crowd heard that, he went to his office and ate his pastries, and some of his close friends came in and said, man, that's just kind of doesn't seem right. How did that happen? How did you get that place? You asked for that guidance and get that place right in front of the bakery. And he said, it only took me 8 times around the block. Yeah, thank you. Okay, let's say our statements of truth together, please.
I am a child of God. I am deserving of good in my life. I am accepting my good now.
Respect to spirituality is the title of today's lesson. And you might ask yourself, well, what does respect and spirituality have to do with one another? One, spirituality has to do with the grander scheme of life, as we all know, and the part of life that is beyond, not only this part, but beyond this current part. The other, respect, has to do with living out this part of our life and how we view one another. Yet what we sometimes forget is that one, spirituality, underlies all the other, respect. And so when we do something that is other than good in this part of our life, that has to do with ourselves or someone else, we not only are doing something other than good for ourselves or the other person, but also we are doing something other than good for our spirituality. Now our spirituality is not going to change, but we're kind of saying like it's the 8th time around the block. Hopefully by the end of this lesson, though, we'll all have a better and clearer understanding of why this is and why this is important in our spiritual journey. Sometimes in this part of life we can feel disrespected. For quite a few years now, don't diss me's been around, that saying. Or, and people say it in different ways, but a person can feel disrespected in many different ways. A person says something to us that isn't true and we get our feelings hurt. We are passed up for a promotion at work that we felt that we deserved. A friend does say something that we interpret as being hurtful and a slight against us. Or maybe a decision is made that doesn't seem to be in our best interest. All these feelings are coming from our personality and have very little to do with the truth of us as a spiritual being. But when we get those feelings of being disrespected, they are real. And for us to recognize them is important. But we need to recognize them for what they actually are. Just because our spirituality underlies everything in reality does not mean that reality is an illusion. And there are a couple of big new thought religions that say reality is an illusion, believe it or not. But reality is not an illusion. Reality is a part of life, the part of life that we are currently experiencing. And the part of life we get to choose whether we live in a heaven or a hell. This reminds me of a story that was of a man that was having a rough time in his own life, and he was a local guy, and One day he went to church, and he had no religion before this, but he went to church one day, and over the next few months became very, very religious. He attended all the meetings that he could at the church and took as much of the classes and things that the church was offering. And he learned a lot more about his own spirituality. When he realized that this part of life is mostly what he chose of it, whether he could make it a heaven or hell, a whole new part of life opened for him, and he began to feel that he was essentially indestructible. He was reading, in fact, from the Bible one day, read John 6:47, which says, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believeth on me hath everlasting life." Very famous quote, a lot of people have heard it. Maybe you couldn't have chosen the verse, but that's what it is. One day during prayer, he thought he received the guidance to test his newfound indestructibility with the message Mach 4. So he went out to 285 and stepped out in front of this large, full truck, this full Mack truck, dump truck. You've seen those big trucks. Well, there's one right there. You've seen them. When they're full, they're heavy. They can't stop very quick. And of course, what happened? The truck ran him over, and he ended his current experience in life. When he got to his next phase of life, he asked, why was I allowed to die in that manner? And the voice was asked if he followed guidance that was given to him. And he said, "Of course I did." And the voice responded to him saying, "Tell me how you can read Mach 4 and it leads you to standing in front of a truck coming down the highway." Well, Mach 4 is Matthew 4. It's not a Mack truck. This story, like others in our own life, can represent how sometimes we can misrepresent or misinterpret the guidance that we are receiving. We've got the guy going around the block 8 times to get what he wanted, not what guidance was telling him. We've got the guy going out in front of a truck to get something that he was thinking indestructible in this body, but it wasn't the guidance that he was receiving. But Matthew 4 is about when Jesus went into the wilderness and was tempted and did not use his power that he had within him to change the world, although he did have that power. He realized that the temptation that he was receiving in this part of life was only that on a personality level, not a spiritual level, and not from the absolute. Just like Jesus, you have the power to shape your life with your individuality, your spiritual self, or you can shift it and come from your personality or your ego self. And just like Jesus, you can use that power in growing your consciousness. Thus, your spiritual awareness that will last forever. Or you could use it, like I said, to try to shape things in this world from an unshapable matter that will not last, from your personality or your ego. It isn't that we can't have a great life right here, right now, but that great life, we have to know what underlies it. If you seek that great life here and now, you may or may not find it. But we have to know what it is based on, because it is not based on, that great life that's going to last forever is not based on the here and now. The great life that you seek is within you and was there before you even arrived here. It will continue to be with you when you're no longer of this realm. The power within you transcends this world and is from the substance of the universe, both seen and unseen. The number one reason that people leave a Unity Church is not because we don't teach from the Bible. It's not because we are not a friendly group, because we almost always hear from anybody that has left a Unity Church that it's a very friendly group. That's not a problem. And it's not really because of our teachings. It's because some people don't think that our teachings at first work for them. Just like the guy that walked in front of the Mack truck. guidance, when we receive it, if it's true guidance, will always be good. The only thing that guidance can be is good. If you receive guidance that is something other than good, question the source. Question where it's coming from. Jesus in the wilderness, if he wouldn't have questioned where it came from, then he would have maybe followed it and used his power in an inappropriate way. But if guidance is only personality-based, question the source. If guidance is not good for all, consider the source. Question it. Guidance comes from God, and God is only good. Did we know that coming in here?
Yes.
I thought so. And since God is omnipresent, God is in you, God is in me, God is in everyone, then good is also in everyone. Even in the Bible quote, we sometimes try to go back and change it to what we think it should say, because English is a much more descriptive language than other languages before, either Hebrew or Aramaic. Aramaic, you could say, or Hebrew, you could say a word and it have a lot of different meanings. It depends on the context. Now, most people nowadays don't know the context of when Jesus lived. So it's hard to say, if you write something, if you interpret something that was written in a different language 100 years or 50 years or one generation after it was written, then you're writing it from your perspective now. You're interpreting it from what you know that word to mean now. If I say he's a cool dude, and you would know what I mean right now. But if I said that in 1950, you'd say, what? He's got a temperature problem? What? He's cold-blooded? What? I don't understand. Wouldn't that be true?
Yes.
What would they think of you if you said that? They'd be looking at you like, okay, what does that mean exactly? So Bible quote from Psalm 138:6, it reads like this. Though the Lord be high, yet hath respect unto the lowly, but the proud he knoweth afar off. So think about for a minute what that means to you. Has there been interpretation since this interpretation? And one interpretation since then is from the New International Version, and it says, though the Lord be exalted, he looks kindly on the lowly. Though lofty, he sees them from afar. Now think about that one for a minute. And they don't say the same thing. First of all, the second one, the newer version, doesn't even say anything about someone being proud. But the first one is a lot more accurate, and we can get a lot more of a lesson from it. Instead of trying to quote the Bible to what we think it should have said in our own understanding, just take it from this is going to be good, and I'm going to learn a lesson from it. So we can come from the knowing that the truth that God is only good, and understand that first part of the first saying from Psalms 138:6, which was from the what?
King James.
Well, it was probably very similar in King James, yes, but this one came from Schofield, the exact quote. So if we take that and we look at it, let's see what it states. Because what in actuality it states is this. And put on your metaphysical cap for a minute and think about it. And could you put, you got the first one up there? Great. In this particular passage, it clearly states that when we are living life from the I am, the Lord on high, of the I am of us, we are in high awareness of consciousness. We show respect for each other and can do anything. But when we live life from our personality, we are not fully expressing from the Christ within. Because it's important to know on that first one, it lets you know more that God is always with you. Whether we are expressing like a child of God, or whether we're expressing like a jerk. God is with you still. And it's our choice of how we do that showing up. When we as an individual learn about the powerful truth teachings that are in the Bible from Jesus, and then realize that Jesus was talking about the powerful truth that he had within himself and that he knew was within you, it changes the picture. And it can be intimidating. In fact, depending on the background that you have coming into a Unity church and learning this, it can cause chemicalization, which a lot of people don't know what that means, but most of you do, I think. Chemicalization is a physical reaction to truth being learned. Or actually, more accurately, it's truth being remembered. Because it wouldn't cause any chemical reaction if you heard the truth of something and it contradicts something that you had been taught in your life. It wouldn't cause any chemical reaction if there was no truth behind what you were hearing in the latter. So one's self-awareness has to be that, is it a possibility that I had learned a falsehood in the past that has been planted in my subconscious? And it indeed is. Yet know this, that truth transcends all untruth. So once you hear a truth statement, you can't take it back. Whether you want to hear it or not. Your ears were open, you heard it, and it might cause some chemicalization, but whether you want to go back to the old way or not, it's too late, I'm sorry. You heard it, it rang true to you, your heart has opened, your mind has opened, and you have to go from here. So what does all this have to do with respect and our spirituality? We have to understand the basis from which we are working from. Our spirituality, as I've said before, underlies everything that we do. The truth of us is our spirituality. We always have our spirituality with us. So the question is, does our spirituality always express through our words and actions? No, not always. And more importantly, does our spirituality express in our thoughts? You know, sometimes people, I've heard people say, in Unity especially, is, oh, I take it back. Something they've said, oh, I take it back, or cancel. There's all sorts of things that people say in Unity and in other churches when they say something that is not of the truth. Well, what did that start with? That started with a thought. And so that thought of untruth that's in our subconscious has to be expelled to get more truth. It has to be. And that's where the law of, or the tool of denials and affirmations comes into play. I've sat on many different boards and that set policy for different things like churches, political organizations, and businesses. And the common theme throughout, whenever there's a disagreement, throughout, no matter what it is, the common theme is, when there's unrest, is that someone is dealing from their personality. Or two people, one or more people are dealing from their personality, which is sense-based. And when we deal with from our personality, we are looking at things here in this room only. We are not taking it from a spiritual sense. And when we're looking at things from this room only, we're only going to be able to produce things in this room. That's not going to last forever. So, what would be better? It would be better to deal from our individuality, which is our spiritual self, and produce things that are long-lasting. In political organization, this looks like this. A person comes and wants a specific candidate to be the one that goes and for their party, and wants everybody else to get behind that particular candidate or policy, whatever it is, because it was their idea, and they get stuck on that. And regrettably, you know, I've done it before too, get stuck on this is the way it needs to be. But when you hear other ideas and other things are coming toward you, open up to those and just say, hey, you know, what about this? Because what happens in political organizations like that, instead of enjoying life with the candidate that's chosen and is elected and is successful, the person coming from his or her personality cannot admit that the other candidate that wasn't their idea to begin with was successful. For example, think of how many, I know maybe you don't get into political conversations with somebody, but I know you've had some before or listened to some other people. Think of how many Democrats will admit that the country prospered when Ronald Reagan was president. And in the same vein, think of how many Republicans will admit that the country prospered when Bill Clinton was president. The ones that are strong in their beliefs, their personality, won't admit it when that was the truth. Both. It didn't make a difference which party. It was the policy that the person brought at that particular time. But the country did prosper during those presidents. And this is our personality when we get stuck in not admitting the truth. What is possible, though, instead of looking at it from our personality or ego, is that we could look at it from our individuality viewpoint and on who is the best candidate that represents the best policies for the country that will benefit everyone, no matter which political party they are representing. In business, the person who wants it their way no matter what, because they feel that their way will be the best way, is coming from the personality or ego viewpoint. How many people remember Al Dunlap? You will once I explain him. You don't remember Al Dunlap? Always in the news. You remember Chainsaw Al, though, don't you? You don't remember Chainsaw Al? No. Woo! Let me tell you about Chainsaw Al. That was his nickname. There he is. You got a picture of him. He probably, his last stint as a CEO was probably in the late 90s. But he was a CEO he was kind of like a hired gun is what he was. He was a CEO, had a strict background, and he was hired by companies that were losing money and that were close to bankruptcy. And for a while he was successful because he would go in there and cut everything. Cut. That's why he's called Chainsaw Al, nickname Chainsaw Al. And he saved some companies by cutting the expenses. But it depends on where you're at, whether you thought that was a good deal. Now, if you were a stakeholder, if you were a shareholder, and he brought those shares up, and you're making money, well, you're thinking, well, maybe that's a good deal. But if you're an employee that got cut by one of those things, you weren't thinking that was such a great deal. Well, he continued to do this for quite a few different companies until the late 90s, or the 90s, somewhere in the 90s, when he went to Sunbeam. How many people remember Sunbeam? Yeah, Sunbeam had a lot of things. They were a very good corporation, but they did the same thing. They were mismanaged and ran into some financial problems. They had to hire Chainsaw Al. Chainsaw Al came in and did the same thing he had done throughout his career, exactly the same thing, because he knew it worked. He knew it was going to work at Sunbeam, but it didn't work at Sunbeam. It didn't at all work at Sunbeam. And Sunbeam is just a very, very small shell of what it used to be now, or then. Because it doesn't always work in every situation. The preconceived idea that we have is from our personality. An individuality idea is open to other expansions of that same idea. In church, that personality base can come on a board, usually joins the board with a preconceived idea of how they think things ought to be at the church. And they are the ones that are going to change it into that preconceived idea. They don't take into consideration all that has happened before they arrived to put the church where it is today, before the person joined the board. It is his or her idea, the direction that the people want for the church, or is it just the idea that a few have conspired together? On the other hand, a new board member can come from his or her individuality, their own spirituality, and join the board looking forward to a new experience of raising their own consciousness. They join knowing that joining the board bears a responsibility to honor both the present ideas of the church body, while at the same time respecting those who have gone before them and the effort that they have put forth to get the church where it is to this point. In this manner, they will grow in their knowledge of leadership and in their spiritual awareness. If we show respect in every day of our life to everyone that we come in contact with, we are expressing truth. We are coming from our spirituality, our individuality. As we do so, and we make this a practice of showing respect for each other on the outer, we grow on the inner to a point where we actually see each other as spiritual beings. We see each other as individuals, living this part of our life together. When we do that, we can experience a part of heaven here on earth. When we consider all the people who have lived before us and see the benefits from their living, without criticizing places and that they may have stumbled and ideas that may not have worked out, we are expressing from our individuality. We are showing respect for our past. And whether we agree with it or not, our past is what has got us to this point today. And for that we can be grateful. We can be grateful. We may not be where we want to be, but we can be grateful where we're at right now. When we show respect to our elders, we are opening ourselves up to learn from what they have experienced in life. And I don't know about you, but that's one thing that I'm sad to see in our country and in our culture that we haven't been doing for a while now. We haven't, and I don't like someone not showing respect to their elders, yet what bothers me even more is that information that the elders have. When we get into the idea that we are coming from our personality, that we know better than our elders, and we may have some ideas that improve things. But with respect to them, we can go forward. But if we don't respect them, what we do is we create a gap. And when we create that gap and don't mend it, we allow a lot of information that they have, no matter what their age really, to leave us without understanding and learning from it. And when that happens, it goes to the old saying is, you're always going to repeat the mistakes again. And you don't have to. You don't have to. When we consider all the people who have lived before us, look at the benefits that they have given us. Look at all the benefits that we have received from them. I mean, we can easily look back in history, not terribly long ago. I mean, we think it's a long time ago, but it wasn't terribly long ago when we had to do a lot more just to put food on the table. I mean, now you can go to McDonald's, which is easy. I mean, I'm not saying that's the best thing for your body, but, you know, you can go there, and it used to be that you didn't have that option. You had to eat at home, you know, and there was a lot to it. I mean, you go back and further in time, you had to have a garden, all that stuff. Things have improved. But for the most part, they've improved on top of what the generation before has done. We have to continue to respect the people that have gone before us and be grateful for what they've given us. When we show respect to others, especially our elders, we are opening up ourselves to learn more of what they have experienced in life. And when we learn what they have experienced in life, we don't have to make the same mistakes that they may have made. They'll willingly tell us what mistakes they have made. When we show respect, because I did miss one thing, when we show respect for somebody, back on business, I do want to go back to that because this is a guy that I really respect, yes. And I wanted to tell you about it because he's the opposite of Chainsaw Al. Jack Welch, and I'm not going to ask how many have heard of him because I didn't get a good response on Chainsaw, but Jack Welch was a man that, you see, yeah, you heard of him. Jack Welch took over General Electric, which is GE, when GE was having a little bit of troubles. And he stayed with that company a long time, but he converted that company into a worldwide powerhouse that has a lot of different reaches, tentacles, and a lot of things. And Jack Welch did it by not going in like Chainsaw Al and cut. He went in and listened to everybody. Where do we need help? What is the problem here? What can we do? And not only did he grow the company, sure, there were some people that were misperforming that had to lose their job, but by far, nothing like Chainsaw Al, just cut, no matter whether you're performing or not. But he went in and grew the company from the people within it. He was not as concerned about the stockholders that were paying his salary as he was the whole company. So he wasn't concerned about making it for today we're going to be good, making it for forever we're going to be good. There's a huge difference. And of course, most people respect him for that. So when we go forth and know that we respect our elders, and we allow that respect to come from our individuality, knowing that they are a spiritual being, and that they were doing their best at their time, we can build on that. We can show respect for each other when we are growing from different viewpoints, to get a larger picture of what we are all about. Right now is the perfect time for us to respect each other, no matter what our age is, and enjoy the blessings that God has for each of us to bring us into this experience that we call life. God is blessing you right now. Amen.